So I think this is live now. This is exciting. I have never done one of these webinars. So hi, everybody, and welcome to this wonderful panel on Who Done It, which is basically a fun way to figure out some random facts about publishing and also get some great answers from a wonderful group of authors, you know, answering some of your deepest questions about the industry. But first, I think we're going to start with some introductions. So I think let's start with whoever's up on the top on my screen, which is Sabina.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sabina Khan, and my book, The Love and Lives of Roxana Ali, came out last year in January from Scholastic. And my next book, Zara Hussein is Here, is coming out next year from Scholastic again, April 6th. And I live in Vancouver, and I've met most of these, well, some of these lovely people, and I'm very excited to be here.
Great, thank you. Next up would be Eileen.
Hello, everyone. I am Eileen Cook. I am a YI author of books such as You Owe Me a Murder and One Lie Too Many, The Hanging Girl, which actually won the John Spray Award for Best Mystery in Canada in 2018, which is kind of awesome. And I also teach creative writing with SFU and with the Creative Academy. So I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up on my screen, I have E.Latimer.
Oh no, I have to follow that. Yeah, so I'm E.Latimer. I wrote The Strange and Deadly Portraits of Bryony Gray and Witches of Ash and Ruin, which just came out in March in the middle of this pandemic. And I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. Next, I have Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Skye. I wrote the Love Curse series that started off on Wattpad, and I'm going to be in the body positivity anthology with Bloomsbury that comes out next spring. I'm so excited about it. It's called Everybody Shines. Thanks for having me. Oh, and I'm from Victoria.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Tanya.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tanya Boteju. I'm coming to you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, also known as Vancouver, BC. And I wrote Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens, which came out last year. And I have a book named Bruised coming out next March. And really happy to be here. Thanks.
Fabulous. Next, I have Syahidah.
Yeah, it's Syahidah.
Syahidah, sorry.
I'm Syahidah. I am an author of Saltwater Spirits, which came out as a self-published work last year in June. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Next up is Jennifer.
Sorry, I didn't read that. You guys all have your books ready. I have to move the codex, I'm sorry. I'm Jen. I wrote a book called Slight, and then I wrote a book called Scheme. It's called The Undoing in Canada, but this is the sequel. It came out in the middle of the pandemic in the US, and I have not, this is the copy I bought for myself off of Amazon because all of my copies are stuck in a warehouse in Tennessee. Thank you, COVID. I also wrote a book last December called Fish Out of Water in conjunction with the Young Actors Project, which you can buy online, and you should follow the Young Actors Project on YouTube because it's a cool thing. I teach creative writing to tweens and teens. So if any of my kids are watching, I love you and I miss you. And that's all. And I'm a cat mom and a kid mom. So there you go. And I like Superman.
Fabulous. Thank you. Next, we have Barbara.
Poelle. I am Eileen Cook's agent. I am in New York City, and someone is moving in upstairs. This is my office, and it's very far away from my children, but you will hear thumps and bumps as someone is clearly moving in upstairs right now.
Good times. Next up, we have Rachel.
Hi, I am Rachel Lynn Solomon. I am the author of You'll Miss Me When I'm Gone and Our Year of Maybe, both from Simon & Schuster. And my third YA, Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, comes out in 10 days.
Wonderful. Next up is Crystal.
I
Everybody. I am a co-founder of the Creative Academy with Eileen Cook, and I have written under a number of different names over the years. I had a career as a children's book author as Crystal Stranahan, and did picture books and early reader chapter books and some middle grade stuff. And as Crystal Hunt, I write nonfiction for writers who are learning how to indie publish and market their books and all those good things. And then as CJ Hunt, I get to write the River's End romance series, which has some with a touch of magic, some with intrigue, and they are kissing books. So they are firmly in the romance genre.
Well, fantastic. Thanks. And last but certainly not least is Tash.
Hey, I'm Tash Mcadam. I have a 4-book sci-fi series called The Psionics, and a high-low, which is high concept, low language, really accessible, book from Orca called Bloodsport, which just came out everywhere under Tash Mcadam. Oh, and I use they, them pronouns. Nobody else did their pronouns. But.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think this is going to be a great panel. So just to give everybody an idea of what's happening is I'm going to be sharing my screen, which will show you a little bit of a Jeopardy style game board. Every author will have a chance to choose one sort of category, and then everybody will have a chance to chime in, and we'll get through those as smoothly as possible. But I look forward to seeing what people's answers are to many of the questions. And there are also some random publishing facts involved as well. So let me share that screen, and then we will get started. Oh, did that work? Can everybody see that? I'm, again, not used to this. Okay, awesome. So let's go with, who wants to start? Maybe we'll start with Tash, since we finished off with them. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted and then I couldn't see my picture. I will take The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for 100.
All right. So how incredible was the feeling when you finally got to hold your book in your hands?
Ooh, I'm going to choose Bloodsport as the book that was most incredible, because that was the first book I got advanced copies for, and when it arrived, it had a sticker on the back for the Junior Library Guild Gold Standard Selection, which I didn't know had happened, so I got my paperback book with a sticker on it, and it was very, very exciting. I was like, what is this? What does it even mean? So that I got to Google and find out that I had been selected for a thing that I didn't even know about. So really cool.
Very cool. Does anybody else want to chime in how they felt when they first got to hold their book in their hands? Nobody wants to share that super exciting feeling of that person. Oh, okay, well, that's okay. We'll let it go this time. And we will move on. Okay, so let's reshare this screen. And let's have Sabina.
Okay. I will take self-publishing for 200.
Self-publishing for 200. If I self-publish, will I still be able to get picked up by an agent or publisher later on?
So yeah, I did self-publish in 2014, and I wondered the same thing. And then in 2016, I queried with a different book, and I did get picked up by an agent, and then a few weeks later by a publisher as well. So yes, absolutely. Just because you self-publish doesn't mean that you're giving up on traditional publishing. Some people do both. Some people go back and forth or whatever. But yeah, absolutely, you can do both, and just continue with whatever suits you best, I guess.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to chime in on that? Is anybody else in this panel self-published? Okay, so Rebecca.
I'm actually not self-published, but my novel was serialized on Wattpad, which is, some people kind of consider it similar. But I happened to get lucky, and it took off, and I had a lot of reads, and then I got a book deal out of that. So there's lots of paths to publication. Obviously, the traditional route, getting an agent, is a normal way, but you can self-publish first, you can publish on a fan site first. There's lots of different ways.
Thanks. I think Eileen had her hand up.
I was just going to add that I think it's such a great time to be a writer because there are all different kinds of options. It is a lot harder if you're indie publishing and then hoping to traditional publish that same book. I think Rebecca's that great story, right, where the book took off and everyone's like, yes. But, you know, sometimes it's better to do more like what Sabina did, which is if you have one book that's great for indie, then you do that. And then when you want a traditional publish, you go that route. So that's all I was going to add.
Great. Syahidah, did you have your hand up?
Oh, yes, I did. I self-published Saltwater Spirits, and that was just a choice that I made because before we started, I was talking to Sabina about just entering the writing community and not knowing anybody really, and then just really, it was just making a choice for myself at that point to prove to myself that I could do it, and also to kind of test out what it would mean to be an entrepreneur and an artist.
Okay, great. And Jennifer, did you have your hand up as well?
Kind of half and half. Yeah, I self-published Light actually originally in 2011, and it was out for 3 months and sold really well. So this agent that I was stalking, I finally said, dude, this is selling. And he said, all right, take it down. I'll hook you up with an editor. We'll fix it. And so we did that. And a year later, we sold it to Harper Canada in like 23 hours.
Oh, wow.
So that sounds really cool, except then it took 6 years for the book to come out. So yeah, so I have some issues around that. But yeah, you can totally, I also self-publish under another name. I write romantic comedies under the name Eliza Gordon for grown-ups. And one of those books, Must Love Otters, has done very well. In fact, an editor from Lake Union was reading Must Love Otters over a weekend and then got in touch with me on Monday and said, do you have anything else? And that's how we sold Dear Dwayne with Love, which is my love letter to Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Nice.
So, yeah, so it can be done. And I do both. I still, like, I'll probably be doing a lot more self-publishing in the future.
I love that name, Must Love Otters. That's great.
And you should. And I have many otters if anyone needs an example of a really great otter.
Awesome. Does anybody else want to, before we move to the next question? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say I really love the idea of hybrid publishing, having, you know, your fingers in all the pies, so to speak. And I definitely want to pursue that someday. I started out self-publishing and then queried as well, and sort of did both for a little while. Yeah, I did take down my first one because I didn't do, like, I think I published it too soon. But I would definitely be interested in having experiences in both. And I think it's good to have multiple income streams as an author.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know when I first got sort of introduced to publishing, I always heard, you know, like, oh, you only self-publish if you know, absolutely have to. But I've heard so many interesting stories from many people now that obviously my views on that have definitely changed. Crystal?
I'm an agent, and I will say all of these are true. Yeah, an agent, I can sit here and tell you that's fine. That doesn't matter. There's a lot of ways to skin a stegosaurus.
Yes. Crystal, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that it's a really cool time to be a writer in that we do have all the choices, and understanding your options, even if you intend to go traditional, if you understand that you do have options as an indie, I think it gives you more power and more choice and more freedom when you're negotiating to feel like you're choosing to publish with that person or not. You don't have to take any offer that comes your way. You have options. So it is a pretty great pathway to be able to, you know, not everyone will find a Barbara who will shepherd them through all of that with such joy. But I think just knowing that you have options is really important as someone entering the market and as a creative person, and you do have choices. So own that power and don't be afraid to exercise it as needed.
Yeah, for sure. I know there's, I think, one publisher in the States that I know of, Swoon Reads, that does sort of like you write stuff on either on like a online platform, and then they can like read that. And if you get a certain number of hits, like basically if it's popular enough, they'll publish it in traditional format or continue to sort of help boost it electronically. So like you say, lots of different options. Okay, so let's move on to another one. Okay. Crystal, do you want to choose next?
Sure. Let's go self-publishing for 300. We're gonna go big or go home, right?
You know, when I first watched Jeopardy, I always thought you had to start with like the 100 and just move down. And then when one day I saw someone start right at the bottom, I was just shocked.
Okay.
Should I hire a
Excellent.
self-publishing company?
All right. So this is kind of a contentious issue in that you could absolutely. They tend to be quite a bit more expensive. There are plenty of unscrupulous ones, which means not so great people that will take your money and provide very little value. I usually recommend people not go with that, especially if you're looking to build any kind of career or generate any real revenue with your projects. Then it's usually going to be better to learn the skills yourself and to put together the perfect team to help you through the publishing process. And so there are lots of really fantastic books, many of them free, that can help you learn what those steps are. And there are lots of resources out there, and all of the authors, like everyone you see on this panel, who are happy to share their experience so that you don't get caught up in something unsavory. We want to keep that for the novels, not so much for the real life experiences. So just be smart and Google the company if you're thinking about going with one, and really talk to other people who have done it, and find yourself a community of folks that you can ask questions of, who have been there, who can help steer you in the right direction for sure.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Syahidah?
Yeah, I actually, with my self-published work last year, I went with an agency. And if you are going to go with an agency, my advice would be to make sure that your values as an artist and a writer and an author aligns with that of the agency. So make sure that if you value, you know, I don't know, artistic integrity, whatever that means, make sure that the agency and the people and the team that you work with understand. But I feel like that kind of applies with traditional publishing as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Okay then. Back to the question board. Let's go with Tanya next.
We were warned about the publishing facts, but I'll take one for the team and go. I'll go for the 300 under fun facts. See how it goes.
Okay.
See what happens.
What is the printer's colophon?
Oh no, this sounds like something I should know, but I don't at all. I have no clue. So somebody else is gonna have to jump in and help me out.
Okay. Anybody else?
No idea.
Nobody? Okay. Going once, going twice?
None of us know.
Okay. I will apparently hit the space bar for the correct answer.
Oh, geez.
It looks like a long answer, but it gives the title of the book, the date, the place of printing. So all of that fun, tiny font at the very beginning of the book, it's basically how medieval scribes used to attribute work to themselves and other people they work with and stuff. So that's kind of, not a lot of people know that, but that's where it kind of came from. So it grew to a tailpiece. By 1480, the information began to appear in the front of the book as the title page, and then became what it is today. So if you see all that info in the very beginning of the book, it started out very, very long time ago. Thank you for taking one for the team though, Tanya.
Good to know.
Okay. Well, then next up, let's have Syahidah. Do you want to pick the next one?
Yeah, I'm a self-published author, so let's just finish that category, y'all.
Self-publishing for 100?
Yep.
How do I price my work?
Okay, so this one, I have a whole story that goes with it, but the short way that you do it, or that I did it, was to look for comparative titles. I also looked for comparative authors. So as someone who is Singaporean and living in diaspora and an indigenous Malay author from Singapore, I looked at other authors that are also Singaporean and indigenous Malay, and how they price their work. And then I also looked at comparative titles. So with Saltwater Spirits, my editor said that it really was comparative with something like Rohinton Mystery or Jhumpa Lahiri's books. And so I looked at those to see what they priced, what they were priced when they came out. So that's how I did it. That's how I determined pricing.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to chime in? Jennifer?
Yeah, I do think when you're self-publishing and you price your books, everything that Syahidah said is absolutely true, but I think you also need to be aware what the market will bear, because I know we would all love to price our books at $1 million because that's how much they're worth, but you really have to kind of watch what the market is doing and see what other books in the genre are doing. Like right now, for example, the ebook for my sequel is $11.99. And I told HarperCollins, no one is going to buy a book for $11.99 because they just don't, unless your name is Stephen King or, you know, unless you're a really well-established author. So if you're an indie author, look and see what other books in the genre are priced at, because if you're, and sometimes like the Amazon system will recommend, oh, your book should be at $2.99. Maybe don't listen to the Amazon system. Kind of look and see what everyone else is doing. And people who've been in the business for a long time can get away with $6.99, $7.99. But if you're brand new and no one knows who you are, you're not going to sell very many books if your book is seen as overpriced, because people, there's still kind of a mindset about an ebook isn't a physical thing that they can hold. They can't put it on their shelf. You know, they can't smell the pages. So they're less willing to pay more dollars for something that's just on an e-reader that they can't, you know, kiss and get signed and showcase. And so yeah, it's just check the market. So yeah, it's just to build on what Syahidah said. So.
Great. Anybody else have anything to add to this discussion? No? Oh, Crystal.
Just a quick note on print books, because I think that's one where you have to do a little math, because there is a print cost associated as well. So if you can look at the market, and then when you know how many pages your book has, there are calculators on the Ingram Spark site or the Amazon site or whichever print-on-demand supplier you're using, and you can type in your pages and your book shape and size and all of the details, and it will tell you how much you're going to make per book, and you can play around with the prices. And so if you kind of combine that, what does the market want and what do you want as far as comparable authors, and then wiggle around in there until you see your price point, then that's a nice way to do it with the calculator that will help you figure out exactly what it has to be as a guideline, and you can work inside of that.
That's really great to know. Thank you. Okay, let's go next with Rebecca. So let's just pull back the screen here. So Rebecca, what would you like to choose?
Traditional publishing is like sadly neglected, so I'll pick 300.
Okay, which YA genres are considered popular or a better fit with publishers, and which are considered long shots or harder to get picked up?
Okay, hopefully Barbara agrees agrees with what I say, but I think that like the market shifts, and there's different times different things are popular. Right now I'm seeing a lot of rom-coms selling, so I'm assuming those are popular. I've heard through the grapevine that fantasy is a harder sell, but it's still selling. If you write something strong and unique and commercial, you're likely going to find a home for it. But so I would just say, if you're confused about what genre your book is, like try to find books that are similar in storyline to yours and see how they position themselves in the market, what they're calling their title. Like my debut novel was a hot mess of genres. It was action, romance, contemporary, mythology. So we didn't know how to market it, so we said contemporary fantasy. But yeah, you just want to try to figure out how to translate the language of your genre into what's in the industry understands and what's working for the industry.
Great, thanks. Yes, Rachel.
I really love what Rebecca said about the market shifting, because the other thing to keep in mind is, let's say, because you're totally correct, there have been a lot of YA rom-coms, which is something that I write. There have been a lot of those selling, but if someone is pitching one now or even writing one now, it's coming out 2 years from now. So if you're looking at mid 2022, even possibly getting close to 2023, there's no telling what things are going to look like then. And maybe this is sort of an overly optimistic way of thinking about it, but even if the market is saturated with fantasy right now, which I think is something a lot of people are hearing, I still have this like deep, firm belief that anything can sell at any time, as long as it is unique and has a really like strong voice. Maybe Barbara will disagree, but like, I really think someone could sell a dystopian book today. Someone could sell someone probably could have and did sell like a vampire book right at the height of Twilight, other vampire books. It's just harder and it needs to stand out a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Barbara, did you want to respond? And then
yeah, everything Rachel said is exactly correct. You can't write to a trend because books come out 2 years after you have sold them, but anything that can stand out can stand out. I mean, to me, sometimes I feel oversaturated or fatigued on something because I'm reading 300 books a year minimum, and I'm seeing everything that's happening, and I'm looking at my queries, and I'm seeing what's coming in, and okay, fantasy is a big thing right now. But then this amazing queer historical fantasy landed in my inbox, and I was like, this, and I just went nuts for it. And so it has to be like the right voice and the right time and the right everything. But your right voice and right time could be a beautifully lyrically written contemporary piece, or it can be knives out fantasy from a time and place in history, or a space opera. But good writing is the beginning and of all of it.
Thanks. And E.Latimer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this is a subject I love very much. I stock Publishers Marketplace and MSWL and all of those things. I find it fascinating. So I am seeing a lot of thrillers. I don't know if Barbara will agree, but I'm seeing a lot of YA thrillers starting to sell. And I think what Rebecca said about saturated fantasy is definitely true, but I'm seeing like a lot of interest in dark fantasy, like darker toned, bordering on horror, like because we had Wilder Girls being used as a comp a lot, that type of thing. So I mean, that could be wishful thinking because that is absolutely 100% up my alley. But yeah, I'm seeing that on like MSWL.
Yeah, horror's coming back. Horror's coming back on the adult side and on the YA side, which is great. I love horror.
So excited.
and even in middle grade, I know that's not what this panel's about, but even in middle grade, I'm seeing a lot more like horror-ish, and it's
I'm going out with a middle grade horror series right now by this author, John Dixon, who wrote YA, and he has a middle grade horror series I'm going out with right now.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Eileen?
I just wanted to add in that, one, I agree with absolutely everything what people said, and I think it's just a reminder that people have to write what you're passionate about, like what it is that really excites you. And I think that one of the great thing is that we're seeing a lot of open and interest in diversity and things coming from different voices, and really seeing that broad range. And I think that's been an awesome addition to the YA market, and one I suspect will continue.
Great. Oh, Tash, yes.
Just on that note, when I first went out with my sci-fi series, I heard back from quite a lot of agents that it wasn't queer enough, or it was too queer because it was an action-adventure story where a bunch of the characters were queer, but there was no like driving romance or like coming out angst. And a couple of people like offered me revise and resubmit with if I could sway it one way, and that was 7 years ago. And I think that really has switched now. I think you're allowed to have queer characters where their whole narrative isn't about being queer, which has always been what I want to write. And I've just been like chopping at that wall for 7 years. And I finally got an agent this year, and I'm like, yes, all the queer action stories must exist. But it's pretty new from what I can tell that people are willing to go out on that.
Oh, can I add something too? I have huge, strong feelings about this as well.
Many people do. Thank you.
So excited to see all of the like sapphic in particular fantasy coming out. Like 2020 was crazy for it, and there's so many good titles on my shelf right now. So yeah, very exciting.
Yes. Rachel.
Just to also quickly add, I think a lot of times when you talk about things that are overdone or saturated, they're overdone when it comes to like white cis straight people. And to say that a genre is oversaturated before like so many people of color and so many queer people have had the chance to really like break into that is I mean, that's like hugely problematic in itself. So I think that is always something I'm thinking about when people are saying that something is oversaturated. It's like, no, it's just a lot of white people writing European fantasy.
Yes, thank you for that point. Anybody else want to chime in on this before? No? Okay. Well then, back to the board. Let's give Eileen a shot at this.
All right.
Okay.
I'm going to go at traditional publishing for 200.
Is there anything in traditional publishing that you personally feel isn't often talked about or is overlooked in general?
There's
Big
probably
question.
about a million things that I can think of in this, so I'm going to try and narrow it down. So I think one thing that I hear is that you have to know someone in order to do that, and you don't. I cold queried my agent, so it is possible you can get in that way. So I think that's important to know. And I think probably the biggest lesson for myself has been understanding that none of this is personal. This is a business, and they're looking at it from a business perspective. And so, you know, I have conversations with Barbara and, you know, with friends on here that I wouldn't have in a public forum because it's a business, and just in the same way that I wouldn't talk in the office about other things. So I think it's just kind of useful to know that. But I wouldn't do anything else. This is 100% my favorite job.
Great. Anybody else have anything that they think is not talked about enough?
And Oprah's not going to call you.
Okay, yes, E.Latimer.
Yeah, I think a lot of us go into like the query process in particular without realizing like once you get an agent, you're not like there yet. You haven't made it yet. I definitely had that impression. Like I have an agent, you know, like everything is going to fall into place now. And that's certainly not what happened. So I would like to see more like open honesty about like how hard it is, you know, like after you get the agent and sometimes even after you get the book deal. But I think that's a topic people often avoid because it would be discouraging to someone who's querying to be like, oh, just you wait. But yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more openness about that.
Yeah, very, very true. Tash.
I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is how many books most writers write before they end up getting an agent or getting their book deal. Like lots of people sell a book to an agent and then will not sell that book to an editor. Not sell a book, sign a book to an agent and then have to wait and write more books and more books. And we hear the word like debut thrown around a lot for authors that have written 6 or 7 books that are moldering on their hard drives or, you know, have been printed off just for their friends and family. So I think that for authors starting out, it can be so discouraging to have that like book that you've written and slaved away over and just worked so hard and not go anywhere. Without realizing that your first book is probably not going to be your best book and that writing is a skill you'll get better over time. Keep going and don't stop, because once you stop, that's when you're done as somebody who's trying to get agented or trying to build a fan base online. If you're self-publishing, like trying to get those sales, it's probably not going to happen overnight, even though the news often makes it seem like somebody just like wrote a book in their sleep and then got $1 million book deal just the next day with no waiting whatsoever.
Yeah, too true. Anybody else have any thoughts on this? I mean, I'm sure many people do, but yes, Jennifer.
Understand how advances work, like what Tash just said. Yeah, you write a book and overnight, oh, it's $1 million. Okay, so how, if you're lucky to get an advance at all, that advance is spread over a long period of time. So I remember when I first started, I was like, oh my gosh, Stephanie Meyer got 6 figures for Twilight. 3-book deal happened so fast. It was lightning fast. And she has all this cash. And then I learned how the publishing industry works. I'm like, oh, so she actually had to wait like 8 years for that money to parcel, or however long it took to get the books out. And Stephanie was smart. You know, she had back-end deals and got into producing. And I mean, she figured it out right away. But there's also marketing. And if you think that selling your book to a traditional publisher means you're going to get all that marketing gold, yeah, that's not happening. There's no, I'm going to be very careful what I say here. But yeah, you're going to have to do a lot of the marketing yourself. So even if you get a traditional deal, you need to get very comfortable with putting your face out there and understanding how social media works and figuring out how ads platforms works and blogging or whatever your thing is, YouTube. Maybe you're a master chef and you can make cake and put it next to your book and like, look at my cake and here's my book. I don't know. I'm not clever. I can't bake. So, and I think pretty much everybody here knows that maybe you guys got lucky and your publisher said, here's $50,000 for your nationwide book tour. And also we have cake. Yeah. I see some heads. So.
Yeah, I can't even count the number of times I went to like a launch party or something, and the author was coming, bringing their own cake and, bringing their own sparkling apple juice, and, everything was basically out of their own pocket, or, I know others who have gotten a 6-figure deal and then there's been 0 on marketing. So that doesn't really help, but yeah, so it's true. Understanding advances is something not many people really get a chance to dig that deep into. Anybody else have any last thoughts on this one before we move on? Okay. Well, since Jennifer ended that one off, let's let her pick the next one.
I can't see. Oh, I can't see behind that one. I guess I'll just do traditional publishing because I can see that. I have the chat box open because it looks like people are asking questions, including Yana, who's my kid. Oh, little Yana, she's so good. Yeah, traditional publishing for 100, Dr. Bittner. Thank you very much. And I apologize too. One of my friends messaged to say that my necklace was hitting the mic, so I'm really sorry that was happening. Thanks, Bonnie.
That's okay. Is it possible to earn a traditional publishing contract without having a literary agent?
Yeah, I've heard of that happening to human people. I don't know. Yada works for Modern Dog, Modern Cat magazine. I'm sure there's cats and dogs that have gotten deals with no agents. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I had an agent, or that I got an agent, is because I'd written that book and I wouldn't leave him alone for 2 years, and he finally said yes. That was in 2010. I'm so old. Okay. Yeah, you can totally do it. I guess. I think. You guys answer. I don't know. I'm confused.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. Thank you. I'm muting.
Absolutely. Absolutely happens all the time. In fact, one of my latest clients, I signed, her name is Syahidah, and she had a book that's coming out, got bumped, thanks COVID, and it's coming out now next year. It's called Siri, Who Am I? It's a fabulous rom-com, juicy kind of genre bender with some mystery in there. And she did it all by herself. And then she got to a point where they were starting to talk, okay, there's film interest, there's this, there's that, and they're starting to talk to her a lot. And her editor actually said, you know what, it's time, you should get an agent. So sometimes that will happen where they're like, it's time for you to have a colleague that can parcel out this information for you. But, she did a great job with that first contract all by herself. And there's a lot of people that continue to do that. Absolutely. There's so many pathways here. Such an exciting time in publishing.
Yeah. Tash.
I signed 3 trad deals with Orca, who are it wasn't like a huge trad deal or anything, but I signed 3 basically pre-agent, and then my agents actually helped me negotiate the contracts for the last 2, but only because I'd signed them between agreement that we would go forwards, and then I got contracts and my agents were able to come in. But they did the same thing with the contracts for the later 2 that I did for the first one, so that I felt very proud of myself. I was like, nailed it, did my own agenting and got the right clauses struck. Yeah, so it can happen.
Awesome. Thank you, Eileen. And then I think we're actually needing to move on to the next one.
So I was just going to add that I think it's really important that mostly you're looking at who's going to be a good fit for me to help me with what my personal goals are for publishing. So what is it that I'm looking for an agent to do, and then particularly targeting someone to do that. So obviously, yes, I want you to sell my book for lots and lots of money, in case you didn't know that, Barbara. But then I'm also looking for help in other certain different areas, like whether that's editorial support, or you want someone to, chime in and help with marketing ideas. And that's something that you're talking about, because you can have a great agent who may not be a good fit for you, but you want to make sure you got the right partner. That's the really important part.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, let's do Eileen. Do you want to pick one?
Oh, I picked.
Oh, you already did. Sorry. E.Latimer, sorry. I saw an E at the beginning and was like, ooh, I can get this without looking at my notes, but I couldn't.
What's the one at the far one? Jennifer was saying as well. It's covered up. I can't see which it is.
Sorry. Let's see.
It's Good, Bad, and Ugly.
The Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
I don't know what that means. Sure. Let's try that for 200.
200? What was your best experience with publishing and what was your worst?
Oh boy. So this is hard to say. I don't want to say worst without, like, I don't want to sound ungrateful. The best was definitely the tour that Disney and Little Brown Young Readers sent me on for Witches of Ash and Ruin. That was amazingly cool. And that was like on one of my, like, you know, the big fancy shiny writer dreams that you have that you write on your like someday before I kick the bucket list. That was on there. So it was really, really cool to have that like with my debut YA. It was not what I was expecting. And weirdly enough, I still wouldn't say worse because it wasn't, but weirdly enough, one of the not so great things happened on the same tour, because that was literally like I went on tour on the 2nd of March. And then by the 7th of March, everything was shutting down and the second half of it got canceled. And it was kind of like this, like, I don't know, it was just like from being incredibly like, yeah, I'm pumped on life, this is amazing, to like, oh, just like a drop, right? So still, yeah, like I said, I don't want to sound ungrateful because I got to go on half of that tour and it was the most amazing experience. So if that's the worst thing that happened to me, like Disney and Little Brown still sent me on a tour and it was still amazing, so.
Great. Rachel, I will let you answer and then you're going to pick our last thing before we move on to the live Q&A.
Okay, cool. I know, I was so bummed to miss you and Rebecca in Seattle. Yes. So we would have met. Yeah, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and do one of my worst thing turned into my best thing. I don't know if anyone else here has ever left an agent before, but I experienced that back in 2015. I had been with an agent for 2.5 years. We had gone on submission with 2 books, and then we went on a very small submission round with a 3rd book and didn't really go anywhere. We got on the phone and it was very clear we had diverging ideas of what we wanted the book to be and where we should go. So I left. It was very amicable, sent a kind email. I started querying again, and all of my friends told me, oh, you've been represented before. I'm sure someone will snap you right up. You're going to be querying for a couple weeks. I was really, I had a bit of a big head about it because of that, and I queried for 6 months before I found someone else. I sent almost 100 queries, and that was probably like my lowest time in publishing, because I was just like, I left my agent because of that book. I was so, I felt so strongly about it, and I just, yeah, people weren't connecting. So yeah, when I did finally find a new agent, I'm still with her. She's now sold 6 books for me. So, did have a happy, I don't want to call it an ending because hopefully I will continue to write books, but yeah, it's just a unfortunate thing that did turn into a really positive thing, which I think is true of most people leaving agents.
Great. Well, thank you. So we do have to move on to the live Q&A soon. So are you okay if we skip the last couple of things and move on? Okay, so there's a couple of questions that have come up. The first one, I think E.Latimer would be able to answer, because it's, could you share some of the aforementioned sapphic fantasy recommendations?
Oh, yes. I'm always very happy to do that. So a couple of the ones that I have read are The Winter Duke that came out in 2020. I apologize, I'm not going to necessarily be able to remember all the authors. Queen of Coin and Whispers, Bella Revolte, I think is how you pronounce it, by Lindsay Miller is another really good one. These are all female. When We Were Magic came out, which is about witches and a coven of sapphic witches, which is amazing. Also, obviously, Witches of Ash and Ruin is also about a coven of sapphic witches. You can tell that's kind of my favorite thing. And then, what else is really good? Oh, I'm always gonna like shout out Gideon Knight, even though it's not technically YA, it's still like hands down my favorite. It's like people relate to it like YA. And then Harrow the Ninth is also coming out in August. So very excited for that. Wonderful. Yeah, it's just a few.
Does anybody else have any that they can think of that they want to give a shout out to? what is your favorite genre within YA? We can just do like random popcorn. Who wants to go first?
How do people
Tash.
pick favorites? Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
how do people do that? Like, I mean, I would say I love everything. I love thrillers, and I love rom-coms, and I love witches. And for me, one of the great things about YA is just having that flexibility to depending what your mood is. I'm not picking, so there.
Okay, Tash?
Basically same. Yeah, I'm a voice guy. If the voice pulls me in, no matter what the genre, I'm on board. But if I, like, back to the wall, had to choose a favorite genre, it would probably be dystopia, which I know is not cool anymore, and we're over the dystopia wave, but I'm all about it. I love those bringing down the government of evil. Can't think why. It feels very topical always for my entire life.
If there's a time to write that dystopian novel, there's a lot of examples to choose from these days.
Yeah. Vive la revolution.
Anybody else? No. Oh,
I'll just say dark fantasy, obviously witches, that's obvious, but yeah, dark fantasy and horror and YA are my favorites.
Great. Okay, one last, well, not one last, we'll see if we can get through two, but one of the first questions that came in was, why is it important to be persistent as a writer and in publishing? Anybody want to take a crack at that? Yes, Rachel.
Well, so as evidence from the story that I told about, my first agent, the very few people I know, if anyone, has had a journey that's a straight line. Like, there are just so many offshoots and so many different things that can happen. Like, I have not heard two similar stories of how to become published. I mean, even in just this chat of, 10 of us, there are so many different stories. So, and I think the other big thing is there's no one, until you have an agent, and not even sometimes then, there's no one breathing down your neck and telling you, like, you need to do this. The motivation really has to come from within. And I feel if that is something that is driving you, just this ambition to become a writer and get your work out there, you sort of have to be your best advocate at every stage. Because there is, like I said, again, until you have an agent, like, there's no one who's going to hold your hand and, like, gently take you through it all.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Syahidah.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, is it persistence or is it stubbornness and just delusion? I'm not. Sometimes I wonder that, and I think it might be, yeah, exactly what Rachel said. Like, it's something, it's like a compulsion to write and to share stories that are in your head, and characters that live in your head. And really it has to come from an inner kind of motivation, which sounds like such a Miss Universe answer, may I just say.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. Yes, Sabina.
Also, as a person of color, I think, having read stories all my life where I never saw myself, or, and then having daughters who also never saw themselves, like even 20, 25 years later, I think that is kind of, it pushes you more and more to write the kind of stories that you would have, liked to see growing up. And even though you do get a lot of pushback and you hear a lot of, I can't connect to that, or I can't, nobody will want to read these stories, you realize that it's very important for you to write these stories despite all the pushback. And I think that's what drives me, at least, and I know a lot of other authors of color, to continue, even though we do face a lot of resistance in the early stages. So yeah, for me, that personally, that was definitely a reason that, I was not ready to give up, no matter, how long it took.
Yes, Tanya.
Yeah, I'll just jump on what Sabina added in, is that, it just takes like one little piece of feedback from one reader who you made a difference for, and you realize, how far-reaching your influence can be, especially if you're writing stories about marginalized voices, and putting that out into the world. It just makes you so much more aware of your influence as a writer. And so if we need a critical mass of that, right? Like we're still way behind in terms of the types of voices that are being put out into the world. And so, you know, if you're a writer and if you're a writer whose voice isn't as represented in literature, we need you. There's lots of people in the world who need you. And so, you know, if there's nothing else that's driving you, that might be something that inspires you.
I will also add on to that, those two comments, and say that it's been very, very special to write, to self-publish, especially at this time. As an Indigenous woman who's from Singapore, there's very, very few of us. I'm one of 3 women. I'm the only one who's outside of Singapore. So yeah, exactly what Tanya said. The first time I got that, you know, wow, I saw myself in your story, that keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a perfect and beautiful way to end this this panel. I want to thank everyone for being here, especially our wonderful authors. So wherever you are at home, give them a huge round of applause. I hope we'll be able to see all of the participants at other places and times throughout the rest of the day. And I think that's it for the panel. So thank you all so much for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
And thank you, Rob, for
Yes,
being a
Rob,
great moderator as usual.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you all so much. We'll see you soon at the next panel too.